The artist featured on this edition of In Focus is guitar virtuoso Paddy Anderson. Originally from Ballygowan, Paddy has since resettled in County Down, having travelled the world to learn his craft as a solo flamenco guitarist. Paddy, you're very welcome to In Focus.
Thank you, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
Do you know what I want to do? I want to ask you a question, which is what is flamenco? But I've thought instead, why don't you show us, play us something? What would you play?
Be a pleasure. Well, actually, the first piece I'm going to play for you today is a piece in the style of soleá. It's my own interpretation of a soleá. And it's quite a good piece for introducing somebody to flamenco because it's one of the most foundational, deepest, most emotionally communicative. I mean, it's all emotionally communicative, but for me, the soleá really encapsulates a lot of what flamenco is about. Putting your heart on the table and letting everybody see your deepest feelings.
Well, why don't you do that very thing for us now? Pick up your guitar and put everything on the table. that was amazing. Why does that embody flamenco?
One of the first things that you are captured by, that I was captured by when I came to flamenco, was this emotional directness that really just, in a very raw way, transmits what you're feeling. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is the unusual for us in Ireland, the harmony, and the soleá is in this Phrygian tonality, which is very idiosyncratic, and I mean this is a key which just shouts Spain and flamenco. And then the strange rhythmical cycles also that you get in soleá. To me, is just the heart of flamenco.
It's very interesting because you started off with an emotional response and then you became very technical quite quickly. Is that how you've always felt about the technicality of the form?
I suppose I was thinking of it in terms of discovering flamenco as a musician. And so, yes, being captured by what everybody is captured by, the emotional content of this music. But then secondly, as a musician, going, what is going on there? You know, and being very, very curious and studying, and eventually studying it.
And why did you choose it above all other forms of music?
I went to live in Spain. I had lived in South America for a year, and went to Granada. I wanted to live there. I was an English teacher, and I was also a musician. And I did have one flamenco recording of Paco de Lucia, which I had listened to, but I hadn't imagined ever trying to broach it on the guitar. I was more of a piano player at that time, although I did, in my student days, I was a busker. So I could strum chords and I could accompany myself, but I didn't have any guitar skills at all. But when I heard this music in the bars of flamenco late at night, somehow I was enchanted by it and taken by it. Now, obviously, I didn't decide at that point I wanted to be a flamenco guitarist, but I was intrigued enough by the music and the culture surrounding it that bit by bit, over months and years, I sort of got slowly pulled into it. In terms of the flamenco guitar, in terms of flamenco in general, it's an oral culture, so it's not written down like Spanish classical guitar would be, and it's also highly technical. I think these were things that appealed to me because I had dabbled in classical music on the piano and struggled with notation and struggled with the idea of interpreting sort of almost sacred music that's written down. And I think the kind of creative, improvisational, oral side of flamenco culture combined with this discipline of becoming technically proficient in something difficult, I think both of those things appeal to me.
Why don't we take another piece now, another look at it musically and in practical terms?
Sure. The next piece is not actually a highly traditional piece. It's my own piece again. The first piece that I played was called Desde la Cuna, which means from the cradle. And the second piece is called The Melting Pot, El Crisol. And both of those titles refer to Andalusia and the melting pot that is Andalusian culture, which is so enchanting to visitors to that part of the world. You've got the North African influence, the Eastern Mediterranean influence, the influence of gypsy culture, which comes from the north of India, and also European and Iberian folkloric influence. So you're really you're very near the Pillars of Hercules there at Cadiz. You've also got the Latin American influence, so it's really a massive melting pot.
And that was the inspiration for you to write this piece?
That was the inspiration for me to write this piece, called The Melting Pot, yeah.
Take it away.
Thank you.
mean, I find it hard to believe that someone who's fairly recently learnt flamenco guitar is composing pieces of that complexity.
Thanks, Mike. I mean, I suppose it became a bit of an obsession. I wouldn't go as far as obsession, but it became a big part of my life. Funny enough, after I returned here from Spain, my years in Spain, I had about 4 years living in Spain. I had a chance to really hear a lot and understand a little bit about how the music works and how the culture works and how the guitar fits with the singing and with the dancing and the harmonies and everything. But I hadn't really at that point had any time to learn any guitar technique. So it was really when I got back here in around 2007-8 that I started to realize that this was something I could offer musically here that very few people are doing. I was also a bit of a late developer in terms of I didn't have a family. I got married in my 40s. So I kind of had time and space to develop that and to spend the time I needed to spend learning how to play the guitar. But yes, it was most professional flamenco guitar, especially in Spain, start very young. They start as kids and they learn almost intuitively. And they can reach very high virtuosic heights, much, much further than I have achieved. But when you start learning as an adult, I mean, I really started to study technique in my 30s. Your body and your sinews and your brain are kind of already set. So it is a massive challenge, and it's only really in the last probably 6 or 7 years that I've really dedicated time to technique, and I've got as far as I have. That's I'm proud of where I've got. It's not, I wouldn't say it's virtuosic. You said it was virtuosic, but as an adult, you really have to struggle.
To me, you're a virtuoso. You play like a virtuoso.
Okay.
And how long did you practice every day to get to that level?
I mean, for many years, I had a day job that I combined with the guitar. I was teaching English as a foreign language mostly, and I was able to put in a couple of hours a day, 2 or 3 hours. But circumstances arose where I was able to go full-time with music for a while, for a few years, from 2017. And I was able to up my practice to 4 or 5 hours a day. And that has taken me to the point where I can perform solo pieces. Whereas before that, I did other stuff, and I still do other stuff. I have with a colleague, we have a duo and we do Latin music and we sing. And I've also accompanied singers and dancers. But to be able to perform solo, which was kind of a dream of mine, that gave me the opportunity when I was able to go full time for a while at least, put in that time. Yeah.
Why don't we take another piece just to show that?
Okay, I'm going to play a piece. This one is not my own piece. This is a piece from quite early on in the solo flamenco guitar canon from the early 20th century by a composer called, and a guitarist called Esteban de Sanlúcar, who was an immigrant from Franco Spain, and like a lot of emigres who were flamenco players, they found themselves in Latin America without a huge amount of people to accompany, and they developed their solo guitar side. And this guy emigrated to Buenos Aires in the 30s, and he wrote this piece. It's called Panaderos Flamencos.
I can see why you're attracted to this music. It's just all-encompassing.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed.
What was the biggest adventure you had on your journey of learning the music?
Oof, what a question. The biggest adventure? You know, when you go to Spain, and when I went to Spain, it was pre-YouTube, which later was actually quite a big help to me in learning technique. But when I went in the early 2000s, the only way for me to really learn flamenco was to put myself in situations close up where I could see it happening. And in Granada, that happened in bars very late at night, at about 3 a.m, when the flamencos, the gypsies on the Sacromonte, which is where I was living, it's a cave district of Granada, and I was living in a cave, and going out very late at night, watching the artists after they'd done their shows for the tourists, and just throw myself in there, have a few drinks, and listen. And after a few weeks and months of doing this, occasionally I would dare, after a couple of drinks, to do some palmas, which is the flamenco clapping, you know. And so I would see what other people were doing, try to do it, and eventually you'd get like the look of like, no, so please stop. Later I would sometimes bring a guitar along to some of these sessions. A couple of years in, still I would be getting the look. It's the kind of music that is very difficult to dabble in. You really have to dedicate yourself to it. So you have to, in those years I had to develop a very thick skin, because I would get comments like, El guiri no sabe, which means the foreigner doesn't understand. I would get, por favor, cállate, please shut up. Or one particular one I remember, when I think I was doing palmas, was, por favor, me está cortando el rollo. Please, you are ruining my vibe. Yeah. Eventually I got a teacher, and the teacher wasn't much kinder. When I would make a mistake, one of the things he would say to me is, ay Paddy, otra vez la polla en la olla. Once more you have placed your willy in the soup.
Outrageous.
So I mean, this
outrageous. Yeah. But in a way, not dissimilar to the reaction you can get at a session of folk traditional music.
Right. Well, you would know more about that than me.
Yeah, and I've also been in the soup situation myself.
Yeah.
So that, obviously, hard to get through that, because very much an Andalusian thing, very much. I'm going to mispronounce this horribly. Please correct me. Gitano thing.
Gitano.
Oh, thank you. Gitano.
Yeah.
I didn't quite get it, but yeah. No. And very much a family thing, so very hard for an outsider to get into.
Yeah, I think so. And even for Spanish people who aren't in those circles, it can be hard to penetrate. I don't think I really ever penetrated those circles very deeply. I mean, when I've gone back in more recent years and I've been invited along to a peña, like a flamenco club, through friends or whatever, which has happened occasionally, they're much more open and welcoming, because they see that I've put in a lot of effort. They may not think I'm amazing with them, but they think, here's a foreigner who's like dedicated serious time, and you've kind of shown your respect towards the art form, and then there's a big welcome. The difficulty, I think, is going in as like a young gung-ho person going, I can do that, or whatever. Then you can get very quickly slapped down, put in your place.
So is there a wee bit of the, God love him, but he's trying?
There may well be, Mike. There may well be some of that.
How does it go now? When you go back now, are you welcomed with open arms, or is it more of a tolerance?
Yeah, I mean, I have good friends over there outside the flamenco scene as well, which is one of the main reasons I go back. And fortunately, they're a lot nicer to me than the flamencos. But now that I have a certain level and I've put in a certain amount of work, people are open to me playing with them and listening. And there's a lot of, I do get complimented for, you live in Ireland and you can do this. So it's a bit like when people come here and they show that they love the place and they decide to move here and they stay here. And it's nice when people appreciate your culture.
You get some kudos though for bringing flamenco to Ireland. I mean, are you the only Irish flamenco solo guitarist?
No, I'm not. There are a couple of other people performing solo down south, and there are a few guitarists who accompany, and a few who do it as a hobby, and a few who perform. But it's a very, very small circle of people, and people who actually do solo guitar shows. I think, as far as I know, there's only 3 of us, but there may be others in the woodwork who could come out of the woodwork that I don't know about. Yeah.
Maybe some of them will respond to what we're doing now. And while I think of that, why don't you play us another tune?
Yeah, that would be a pleasure. Yeah, that would be a pleasure. The next piece is one of my own. It's in the style of siguirilla, which is another one of those very cante hondo or deep singing styles. Traditionally quite dark and expressive of grief, of death, of imprisonment, of those types of themes. But as a wise person, as wise people will tell you, without suffering there's no joy. So I've called this piece Barro y Loto, which means mud and lotus.
Sudden Lotus, fabulous, fabulous. Why did you give it that name?
Yeah. I mean, I have an interest in Eastern philosophy a little bit, and in Buddhist circles, there's a teaching which says that without the mud there is no lotus. It's very simple and very profound at the same time, and it's that kind of integrative Eastern philosophy of no separation, no distinction between the bad stuff and the good stuff. It's all the same.
I've been in places throughout the world where without the mud there's no floor. But a very different interpretation, the Buddhist interpretation. What would you say was the biggest moment in your career in flamenco music to date?
The biggest moment?
Biggest moment, yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, doing my solo show for the first time, which was only a couple of years ago, was something that I'd worked on for years, and it was a dream of mine. And we had the pandemic, which was really tough for me and for musicians and for lots of people. Fortunately, it wasn't as tough for me as for a lot of people who lost loved ones. But it also provided a space for artists to work on their art, I think, and for musicians to work on their music. And I think those couple of years allowed me to develop my playing enough to have the confidence to go out as a soloist and play. And for me, that was a big achievement. Last year also, I got a really interesting job composing and doing musical direction for a show in Scotland. It was a modern adaptation of Don Quixote. And I was fortunate enough to receive the phone call and get the job to do a flamenco score for this show that we did 5 weeks of shows in Dundee Rep Theatre and Perth Theatre. And I got to work with another great flamenco musician, Pablo Dominguez from Cádiz, and had a lot of fun doing it, working with great actors, great director, great writer. It was tough leaving home for 10 weeks, but that was a great recent experience.
And you're being far too modest, because The Guardian also voted it amongst its top 10 live theatre shows of last year.
It got good reviews. It was really good. The writing was really good. Direction was good. The acting was amazing. The lead actor, Benny Young, was an inspiration to all of us. And yet, we were lucky enough to get good reviews.
And deserved reviews.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to ask you one last question, which is the question you've been dreading all the way through this, which is, what are you going to do next?
Oh, goodness. Mike, I suppose like with a lot of people who dedicate a lot of time to their music or their art, you have your artistic life and then you have your professional life. And occasionally these things gel together very well, and occasionally they don't, Artistically, I'm moving on with the guitar. I'm still in love with the guitar, and I just try to progress and become better and increase my knowledge, increase my repertoire, and perform from the heart when I get a chance to perform. Professionally, things aren't as clear to me because obviously we have the cost of living crisis, and I'm based in Northern Ireland, where we have a small population, a small audience for this type of thing. Whether I can make ends meet with flamenco guitar in the long term is another question. But I'm so grateful to have had a period where I was able to dedicate so much time to the guitar. Whether I'll be able to dedicate so much time in the next few years is less clear. But in terms of the music and flamenco, we carry on and we do our best to maybe be a little bit of an ambassador for flamenco culture in Ireland.
Paddy, it's been an absolute delight having you on In Focus. And with the thought of the journey that's still to come for you, let's have one last tune for the road.
I'll play a piece by a guitarist from Jerez de la Frontera. Jerez, as I'm sure you know, is the home of sherry, the home of horses, and the home of bulerías, which is one of the most festive, joyous forms of flamenco. And this is a piece by a fantastic, great guitarist who's sadly passed away, but whose family still continues producing incredible guitarists. His name is Moraito Chico, and here are some of his falsetas por bulería.